is the mind killer.
Where warriors fight with a thought and kill with a word.
Fear is the mind killer, and in 1984, it was also the movie killer. Before the recent epic reimagining, the universe brought the legendary novel Dune to the big screen. And let's just say, it was as weird behind the scenes as it was on screen. From battles with the studio to bizarre casting choices, the making of Dune was a desert storm of chaos. Get ready for liftoff, spice addicts, because here are 20 weird facts you didn't know about Dune. Let's start today's list strong. Before taking on Dune, David Lynch had a golden ticket dangled in front of him. George Lucas invited him to direct Return of the Jedi. Imagine that. Ewoks, Luke Skywalker, and the Death Star finale directed by the king of surrealism. Lynch actually met with Lucas and even looked at early designs, but he later said the experience gave him a massive headache. Lynch claimed he didn't understand the material and felt completely out of place. Instead of joining the most successful sci-fi franchise in history, he turned it down and chose to direct Dune. In hindsight, it's one of the strangest what-ifs in Hollywood history. Instead of instant box office glory, Lynch ended up with a confusing, heavily edited flop. But maybe it was fate. Star Wars fans probably weren't ready for a Lynchian Ewok dream sequence. When Alejandro Jodorowsky tried and failed to adapt Dune in the 1970s, he hired H.R. Giger, the Swiss artist behind Alien's nightmare designs, to create sets and monsters. Giger's vision for House Harkonnen was grotesque, biomechanical, and horrifying. After Jodorowsky's project collapsed, some of his collaborators hoped Lynch might bring Giger back for the 1984 version. For a while, there were discussions about reusing Giger's concepts, but producers decided his art was too disturbing for mainstream audiences. The irony? David Lynch's Dune still ended up being called too weird by critics. So imagine how far out it could have been with Giger's twisted nightmares on screen. Fans today drool at the thought of his unused concepts, towering skeletal palaces, grotesque thrones, and machinery fused with human flesh. It might have been terrifying but unforgettable. Instead, the Harkonnen designs we got were toned-down versions. It's one of those missed opportunities sci-fi fans still mourn, do you? Ah yes, Sting in a shiny metal-winged codpiece. That's the image most people remember when you say Dune, 1984. Playing Feyd-Rautha, Sting had to wear a bizarre, almost comical costume that left very little to the imagination. Sting later admitted the outfit was wildly uncomfortable and more embarrassing than intimidating. But the studio loved it, insisting it made him look more dangerous. Spoiler, it didn't. Instead, the codpiece became one of the most unintentionally funny moments in the movie, overshadowing Feyd's actual performance. Fans still joke that Sting's wardrobe malfunction is the true villain of the story. Decades later, interviews with the cast always circle back to that costume, proving some legacies just can't be escaped. To this day, people rewatch Dune not for the story, but to see Sting strut around in what looks like a rejected glam rock stage outfit. If you disliked it as well, love a thumbs up and tell me in the comments, intimidating, hilarious, or just plain weird. When Lynch cast Kyle MacLachlan as Paul Atreides, nobody knew his name because he'd never acted in a film before. Fresh out of drama school in Washington State, MacLachlan had only done stage work when he was suddenly thrown into a $40 million sci-fi blockbuster as the chosen one destined to save humanity. No pressure, right? Lynch said Kyle had the perfect look of innocence mixed with strength, which was exactly what he wanted for Paul. Critics at the time weren't kind, calling his performance stiff, but today, fans see it differently. His slightly awkward delivery actually works for a sheltered nobleman thrust into an alien desert war. More importantly, the role kicked off a lifelong collaboration between Lynch and MacLachlan, leading to Blue Velvet and the legendary Twin Peaks. So while Dune didn't make him an instant star, it opened the door to one of Hollywood's weirdest, most beloved actor-director partnerships. You know, a movie is weird when one of its most iconic images is Patrick Stewart charging into battle while holding a pug. Playing Gurney Halleck, Stewart was given the unusual direction to grab a dog before running into combat. Why? Nobody really knows. Some claim Lynch wanted to show the Atreides nobility and compassion. Others think it was just a spur-of-the-moment decision. Stewart himself later laughed about it, calling it the strangest thing he'd ever done on film. And this is a man who played Captain Picard and Professor X. The result is one of the most surreal battle shots in science fiction history. The image of a future Shakespearean legend in a still suit, cradling a pug while lasers fly, sums up exactly why Dune, 1984, is both loved and mocked. It's weird, it's random, and it's unforgettable. Sci-fi may have sandworms, aliens, and zombies, but only Dune had a war pug. David Lynch originally delivered a cut of Dune that was over 4 hours long. He wanted to tell Frank Herbert's story with the scope and detail it deserved. But Universal Pictures panicked. A 4-hour movie would mean fewer showings in theaters, which meant less money. So the studio hacked it down to a little over 2 hours. Entire character arcs, world building, and political subplots were ripped out. To patch the holes, they added clunky narration and confusing voiceovers, which only made things worse. The end result was a movie that baffled critics and casual viewers alike. Lynch begged for a longer runtime but lost the battle. Fans still dream of seeing that mythical 4-hour version, sometimes called the Holy Grail of lost sci-fi. Sadly, Lynch has made it clear, that cut is gone, and he wants nothing to do with it. One thing's for sure, what we saw was not his vision. The sandworms of Arrakis are the beating heart of Dune's mythology. In Lynch's version, these colossal beasts weren't CGI but practical models made of fiberglass, rubber, and hydraulics. Each worm was enormous, with crews operating machinery just to make them wriggle and open their gaping maws. Shooting the worm scenes was a logistical nightmare. Machines broke down constantly, sand clogged the gears, and the Mexican desert heat made it miserable for everyone involved. Still, the end result was pretty spectacular. Audiences might laugh now at their slightly clunky movements, but in 1984, they were jaw-dropping. Even Frank Herbert praised them, calling them magnificent and saying they looked exactly as he'd imagined. Modern CGI worms are sleek, but Lynch's versions had real weight and texture. You could almost feel the sand shake. They were scary not because they were perfect, but because they looked like monsters clawing their way out of the earth. The Padishah Emperor Shaddam IV was played by Jose Ferrer, but behind the scenes, Lynch had stranger ideas. Early in pre-production, the team actually considered making the Emperor's palace sequences flamboyant, like a rock opera. Producers even discussed casting a famous musician for a cameo to bring a larger-than-life vibe. Believe it or not, Freddie Mercury's name was tossed around. Imagine the Queen frontman strutting through the imperial court, draped in royal silks, giving orders with that booming voice. Sadly, the producers got cold feet, worrying it would push the movie from epic sci-fi into campy parody. Instead, we got a more traditional emperor and a serious court. But looking back, Freddie Mercury wouldn't have been out of place. After all, The movie already had Sting in a metal codpiece and Toto on the soundtrack. If anything, a little more glam might have made it legendary instead of infamous. Yes, Toto, the same band that gave us Africa and Hold the Line, composed the entire soundtrack for Dune, 1984. David Lynch wanted something modern and unusual, so he turned to rock instead of traditional film composers. Toto teamed up with the Vienna Symphony Orchestra to create a sweeping mix of guitars, synths, and classical arrangements. The result was one of the film's few universally praised elements. Even critics who hated the movie admitted the score was epic. Ironically, Toto later confessed they barely remembered the project because they were so busy touring. Still, the music gave the film an emotional grandeur that helped carry the confusing story. Listen closely, and you'll notice the soundtrack goes harder than the movie itself. It's a strange but brilliant pairing. Sting's shiny codpiece, sandworms swallowing spice harvesters, and Toto wailing in the background. Be honest, did Toto's Dune soundtrack slap, or was it a total miscast? As we hit the mid part, at number 10 is one of the strangest facts of all. David Lynch never actually read Frank Herbert's Dune novel before making the movie. He admitted later that the book's complexity overwhelmed him, and he didn't want to get lost in the weeds. Instead, he relied on the screenplay and production notes to shape his vision. That might explain why the movie looks stunning but feels hollow compared to Herbert's philosophical political saga. Fans were outraged. How could the director of such an iconic story skip the source material? Lynch's defenders argue that he wanted to make his version, not just adapt Herbert word for word. But when you compare Lynch's Dune to Villeneuve's modern adaptation, where Denis read the book dozens of times, it's clear which method paid off. Lynch gave us wild visuals, but the deeper ideas got buried, sometimes not doing the reading really does show in the final project. When the author himself showed up to see Dune, fans expected him to be outraged. Frank Herbert spent years creating the most intricate sci-fi universe ever, and Lynch's movie chopped, rearranged, and simplified much of it. Surprisingly, Herbert was diplomatic. He praised the look of the movie, especially the sandworms, which he thought were magnificent. But he admitted the script turned his carefully layered story into what he called clunky exposition. He joked that Lynch's Dune was my Dune, but also their Dune. In other words, he wasn't thrilled, but he wasn't ready to trash it either. Unlike some authors who outright hate adaptations of their work, Herbert seemed amused by it all. He probably knew his sprawling philosophical saga would never translate perfectly to a 2-hour movie. Still, you have to wonder what he really thought when he saw Sting's infamous codpiece for the first time. This one is going to make you mad, or at least frustrated. In Frank Herbert's book, the Atreides master the weirding way, a mystical martial art blending speed, perception, and heightened awareness. Lynch, however, thought audiences wouldn't buy martial arts on screen, so he turned it into sound-based weapons called weirding modules. Instead of elegant combat philosophy, characters ended up blasting lasers from boxes strapped to their throats. Fans were baffled. Herbert himself was disappointed, saying Lynch missed the point. What was supposed to be a deep exploration of human discipline and training got turned into awkward pew-pew battles. Some fans defend it, saying it gave the movie a unique sci-fi flair, but most agree it was a huge misstep. Even today, Dune fans debate the weirding way versus weirding modules. Villeneuve wisely went back to Herbert's original concept for his movies, but in the 1984 version, Every time a character yelled into a gun box, the audience cringed and definitely laughed as well. To cut costs, the entire movie was filmed in Mexico City, where massive sets were built inside Churubusco Studios. These weren't small sets either. Arrakine's palace and throne room were among the largest ever built at the time. The sheer scale was jaw-dropping. But with size came problems. The Mexican climate was hot and unforgiving. Equipment constantly malfunctioned, and almost everyone got sick at some point. Cast and crew suffered food poisoning from local catering, and the conditions slowed production to a crawl. Kyle MacLachlan later joked that half the film was shot between bathroom breaks. Despite the chaos, the sets themselves were breathtaking. Watching Dune, you can see the ambition in every towering wall and cavernous room. For all its flaws, the film never looked cheap. Lynch and his crew may have battled exhaustion and food poisoning, but they built a world that looked as grand as Herbert imagined. Directing Dune was no easy ride. David Lynch constantly clashed with producers who wanted a more commercial, family-friendly sci-fi blockbuster. Lynch, meanwhile, wanted something stranger and more artistic. At one point, the studio interfered so much that he nearly walked away. Unfortunately, his contract tied him to the project, forcing him to finish under their terms. Lynch later said he felt like a hired gun, directing someone else's vision rather than his own. The result shows half Lynchian weirdness, half studio meddling. That's why the movie feels so uneven. Still, his stamp is unmistakable. The grotesque Baron Harkonnen, surreal dream sequences, and bizarre soundscapes all scream Lynch. Fans often wonder what could have been if he'd been given free rein. Would Dune have been a masterpiece, or just even weirder? What do you think? Should Lynch have quit to save his reputation? Or was it worth it for cult history? Comment below. And if you liked the video so far, remember to leave a thumbs up. While most cast members distance themselves from Dune, Sean Young, who played Chani, still stands by it. She has repeatedly defended the film in interviews, saying she loved the experience and thought critics were too harsh. Young insists Dune was ahead of its time and that audiences just weren't ready for its ambition. Even though her role was small, she remembers the set as magical and believes Lynch captured something unique, even if the studio didn't let him finish his vision. Fans have since given her performance more appreciation, especially after Dune gained cult status. Young also became a favorite at science fiction conventions, where Dune fans still ask her about the production. Unlike Patrick Stewart, who laughs at the pug, or Lynch, who disowns it entirely, Sean Young continues to show loyalty to a movie many consider a disaster. You have to respect her for sticking with the spice. After the theatrical release flopped, TV networks tried to fix Dune by airing an extended version in the late 80s. This version ran nearly 3 hours and included deleted scenes and long stretches of narration explaining the plot. Fans hoped it was closer to Lynch's true vision, but nope, it was stitched together by the studio without his approval. In fact, Lynch hated it so much that he had his name removed from the credits. Instead, it was credited to the pseudonym Alan Smithee, the go-to alias for directors disowning their work. Watching the extended cut, you get more exposition, more desert shots, and more confused faces staring into the distance, but not necessarily a better movie. For hardcore fans, it's an interesting curiosity, but Lynch himself insists it's not the version he wanted. If you thought the theatrical cut was messy, the extended one is like adding more spice to an already overcooked stew. Before Lynch's version, visionary director Alejandro Jodorowsky tried to make Dune in the 70s, and his dream cast was insane. He wanted Orson Welles as Baron Harkonnen, Salvador Dali as the Emperor, and yes, Mick Jagger as Feyd-Rautha. The Rolling Stones frontman was apparently interested and even agreed to the role, but Jodorowsky's film collapsed before shooting began. When Lynch's version came around, the role went to Sting, complete with his infamous codpiece. It's wild to imagine Jagger strutting around Arrakis, sneering lines while sandworms roared in the background. Honestly, given his stage presence, he probably would have killed it. But fate had other plans, and we'll never know if Jagger's fade would have been iconic or just plain ridiculous. Either way, Dune has the rare distinction of being the sci-fi epic that could have starred a Beatles rival and a surrealist painter at the same time. That alone is cinema history. Despite the chaos of the first movie, producers still considered making a sequel to Dune. After all, Herbert's novel was only partially adapted, and the ending clearly teased bigger things to come. But when they approached David Lynch about directing Dune 2, he flat out refused. By then, he was burned out, frustrated, and embarrassed by the interference he endured. Lynch said he didn't want to spend years making something he didn't believe in. Instead, he turned his energy toward Blue Velvet, which became one of his most celebrated films. Ironically, had he said yes, we might have seen a bizarre Lynchian take on Dune Messiah. Instead, the sequel never happened, and fans had to wait decades for another adaptation. In a way, Lynch walking away saved his career. Sometimes quitting is the best decision, even if it means no one ever got to see Sting in a codpiece again. With a budget of nearly $40 million, Dune was one of the most expensive films of its time. Unfortunately, it only made about $30 million worldwide. Critics tore it apart, calling it incomprehensible, bloated, and a failure on every level. Audiences, confused by its dense mythology and chopped-up story, largely stayed away. It was a harsh blow to Universal and an embarrassing moment for Lynch. For years, Dune was remembered more as a cautionary tale than a cult classic. Yet, like so many misunderstood movies, it slowly found its audience. Sci-fi fans started rediscovering it on VHS, praising its ambition even while admitting it was a mess. In the end, Dune's box office bomb status didn't kill its legacy, it just delayed it. Sometimes the weirdest failures live longer in pop culture memory than safe, forgettable hits. And let's be honest, nobody's hosting conventions for Police Academy 2. Today, Dune, 1984, is one of the great cult movies. Sure, it flopped at the box office and baffled critics, but fans have embraced its flaws. The clunky dialogue, strange costumes, and surreal Lynchian touches all combine into something unforgettable. It's a movie people love to laugh at, quote, and rewatch, not because it's perfect, but because it's so unapologetically weird. Over the years, it inspired fan edits, documentaries, and countless debates about what could have been. Even Denis Villeneuve, director of the 2021 Dune, has said he respects Lynch's attempt, even if it failed. There's something charming about a movie that swings for the fences and misses spectacularly. In the end, the spice did flow, just not in the way anyone expected. Dune became proof that even a flop can turn into a phenomenon, as long as it's bold, ambitious, and just a little bit insane. Conclusion. And there you have it, 20 weird, wild, and downright bizarre facts about Dune, 1984. From Sting's winged codpiece to Patrick Stewart's battle pug to Toto shredding over sandworms, the making of this film was just as strange as the movie itself. What started as a failed blockbuster is now a cult legend, loved for its ambition, flaws, and sheer weirdness. So what do you think? A misunderstood masterpiece or a glorious mess? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more cinematic chaos. And remember, he who controls the spice controls the universe.